There's a fake audio of Sadiq Khan that was going out that was completely misleading. And in it, I think he was basically purported to be saying words to the effect of Remembrance Day should be moved so the pro-Palestinian march could happen. I think that was the one. There's so many going around. Anyway, I've talked about this before. The power of AI, the power of fake media is one thing, but in politics it can be very, very toxic and very, very dangerous. What was I really surprised, and this kind of fits in with our theme of what I've been asking you, what do you expect from the police, is that this production, which has some serious sort of implications for social behaviour, for political debate, and the argument that's been put forward is that there has been no crime committed here. And I'm sort of happy to accept that as fact, because I guess there is fact. But the big part of me is asking, why not? So to help guide me through this, I'm very pleased to say I've been joined by Liam Kotrie, lawyer and commentator. That's an interesting joined-up thing, lawyer and commentator. Welcome, Liam.
Good afternoon, Nick.
Do you commentate on legal things or just anything else?
I certainly do, on this channel and others.
Well, that's great. Now, look, you would have heard the introduction. As an ex-politician, I think the power of a video and clips is really, really important and potentially a threat to our democracy in many ways. So I was really surprised that, according to the police and the Met, who've been examining this particular fake audio, there's no crime being committed. If not, tell me, can you explain why there's no crime here?
Well, it's incredibly interesting. There are, of course, many laws in place to protect the public in different circumstances. There are laws in place to protect the public in public situations, Public Order Act, for example, the Serious Crime Act, 2007. But these laws don't always stretch as far as technology advances. The impersonation of prominent figures, whether politicians, actors, sports stars, or whomever, using AI or otherwise is a potential danger to the public. And if there is a danger to the public, the law, one would think, should intervene. The development of AI is moving at such a fast rate that the law can't risk being too far behind to ensure public safety. Fraudsters have used these kinds of techniques for many years, using the image of celebrities who supposedly endorse a product or service or cryptocurrency. Martin Lewis being a common one of these, so much so that he refuses to endorse any product to ensure that whenever you see his face, you know that it's not really him endorsing it. Sorry.
Go on. Well, that point, your first point is that the governments are behind the curve. And by the way, that's not a political point. I think it's how the speed of technology means governments are almost inevitably behind the curve. That kind of makes me think about Rishi Sunak's AI summit, where he said we're all going to be protected. I mean, is it realistic that we can invoke laws to protect the public, the politicians, the actors, from the misuse of AI? Is there nothing existing at the moment that could be used and tested, for example, to see if it would work?
Well, I think the Met looked whether or not they were going to test the law in this kind of situation, decided that it didn't stretch far enough. I think I agree. The law doesn't currently do much to stop this kind of behaviour, if it does anything at all. One may suggest this is encouragement to commit a crime under the Serious Crime Act, as I briefly mentioned before. But again, I think this is a stretch and difficult to prove, and people can't just be charged with offences, then end up in court, and then barristers or whomever else making it clear to a judge that the elements of the crime aren't satisfied. And it's not really what the legislators had in mind when they were drafting these acts. As technology develops, the law has to develop while protecting basic rights such as free speech, and that's all sorts of different ways, including their basic human rights.
Because actually, it only really becomes a problem when in terms of politicians the way Sadiq Khan was misrepresented here. Well, not misrepresented. He never went near the subject. It was a complete fake. It's the consequences that determine whether something has been important, isn't it? Because if people had taken to the streets and in horror at what he'd suggested, or something like that, where it comes out the day before an election, something toxic comes out.
Something I was going to say myself.
But I suppose my question is, can you think of a way that we could introduce legislation? Is anyone looking at this?
Well, as I always say in these interviews, it has to be done very carefully. No, not a knee-jerk reaction to a certain incident like this one. Incidents like this should be taken very seriously, of course, but we have to be very careful about legislating law. As I said, the difficult balance with people's privacy, for example. The online safety bill covers things such as deep fake pornography and things like that being published, which is a horrible invasion into someone's private life. At the same time, the online safety bill also risks privacy in other ways, as the messaging services who provide end-to-end encryption will tell you. So it's a very difficult balance. But the law would have to talk about the falsity of the statement and the danger that it may pose as a result. And it has to have both of those things. Simple AI images showing... I think there's a Twitter account showing Donald Trump in different historical moments throughout time, which of course he wasn't involved in, but it's a joke, and jokes are allowed. But it's when it causes a danger to the public. That's when we have to be very careful.
So is there, you see, it's interesting because you talked about the online safety bill, and the people being held to account there are the platforms, as I understand it. Many of the big platforms that distribute social media, they have to make certain efforts to regulate and control what goes out there. Is there a way around this by having a mechanism where they remove stuff if it's clearly and credibly a fake? Or is that quite a torturous process? And I suppose I'm answering my own question a bit here. By the time they've done anything, it's probably gone round to about 10 million people.
Well, exactly. And you mentioned in your introduction that you attempted to play the clip, but you realised it was a bad idea. And people who see these clips and comment on them on Twitter or wherever else, even though they're telling people to remove it, the fact that they're giving it attention means that more people are going to see it. It's just the way these algorithms work. The best thing to do really would be to ignore it altogether, not retweet it, not to send it to your friends.
But we can't decide, can we? You see, I looked at it and I thought, I'll tell you what I thought, even Khan isn't such a so-and-so to put something out like that. It's got to be fake. I've rather restricted what I was going to say there. So, but I made that judgment. But lots of people won't, particularly if it speaks to their own preconceived ideas anyway.
We talked about election periods, and it was exactly the example I was going to give. We're likely to have an election towards the end of next year. The day before the election, if a video which supposedly shows Keir Starmer pushing an old woman over and taking her handbag, it's not going to do the election any favours in terms of fairness. We have to be very careful with these things and be ready to remove them as soon as possible. How we do that is a whole other matter when we're talking about huge private companies who are richer than governments dealing with having that responsibility. I
mean, sadly, you've navigated through this and I totally understand it, but we're kind of coming to the conclusion is we don't have the answers yet, isn't it?
We don't currently have the answers, and any law that we put in place has to think about the future as well. But when we're thinking about the future, we need to think again about other rights which may be curtailed as a result. It's a very difficult time. It's a very new technology. We're still young in this age, and we need to be very careful about how we act to make sure that the technology has room to grow, because it will help us in many ways, of course, and mostly, hopefully, it will only help us. But we also need to make sure that people are protected in other ways. It's very difficult to do, not knowing what the future may hold. It's such a fast-moving space.
Liam, I'm certainly not going to let this subject go, and I suspect we'll be talking again as things evolve and develop. Thank you very much indeed, Liam Kotrie, lawyer and commentator.